All right. Well, welcome, parents and guardians of AFS participants. My name is Parker Allen, and we are really excited to connect with you tonight for our webinar for parents and guardians of AFSers who will be going abroad. If you haven't already, I invite you to change your name in Zoom to include the country that your child will be going or studying abroad with. So, as we kick off tonight, we want to give a warm welcome to you all. We have families from across the United States with children participating in programs departing from June through September to multiple destinations on academic year, semester, or trimester programs. So we're really excited for the many diverse experiences and journeys ahead of you all. As I noted, I am recording tonight's webinar, so we'll make sure that we also send a recording out so you can review it as well. We're going to do our best to keep this to about a little over an hour. So thank you so much for your time tonight. In terms of what we hope to chat about tonight, we look forward to covering a myriad of topics. So we want to make sure we provide an introduction to how AFS will provide support to you and your child, your
What?
teenager,
Do you want it on the computer or on your phone?
while abroad. And we also hope that you can connect as parents and guardians as well. We also want to contextualize what does immersion look like? What is the program design, and what are some of our educational outcomes from that design? And then also, what is the experience like for a participant? And how can you support them during the many highs and lows during their experience? We'll also chat about what the AFS support system looks like so that you can feel comfortable in terms of working with it. I'll end with with a few quick hitters on logistics, and then finally we'll have a moment for questions and answers. And I should note that we also invite your questions throughout tonight, so please drop those into the chat, and we'll do our best to address them. In terms of our goals from this agenda, we won't be speaking on country-specific or program-specific elements, but we do hope to contextualize kind of that AFS experience for you. And as I mentioned, we want to make sure that you feel empowered to anticipate the highs and lows of the program while personalizing the support department here at AFS-USA. In terms of some tips for tonight, we hope to speak about kind of the emotional experience of being a parent or guardian of an AFS exchange student, with you specifically as our audience member. So we've conducted a few webinars with all participants, with the participants being the audience member, but we hope to speak to you in a different way as parents and guardians. With that said, we won't cover logistics such as visas, timelines, or travel. But during last week's program, we were able to touch on that as well. Of course, we invite your questions, but that's not necessarily our program, our content design for this evening. So before we really begin, we do want to extend a sincere kudos to you all for allowing your child to participate in something unique and meaningful. We are enormous believers in the power of exchange programs, and the individuals that you'll hear from tonight have all experienced that firsthand, and especially myself included. So we want to extend our gratitude to you for trusting AFS to support your son or daughter's experience, and their journey too. So I invite you in the chat to share what some of your hopes are for your AFS participant. What skills do you hope your child will gain or improve during the exchange, or what do you just hope that they get out of it? So I invite you to chat together as fellow families. And while we do this, we want to take a quick moment to make sure that you have an understanding of who AFS is. And for many of you, you've likely already heard this, but we want to make sure that we include you in this too. Um, so AFS began back in 1915 with a series of volunteer World War I ambulance drivers who wanted to support the war effort in a peaceful manner. And they were able to help ferry the wounded from multiple nationalities through this volunteer work. And it was this involvement of meeting people from different nationalities that naturally connected them with seeing the impact of connecting with people who are different from them. So it was through this act of volunteering and meeting individuals from different backgrounds that the original volunteers came up with an idea of a way to prevent wars such as World War One from happening again. And that was the concept of student exchange, supported by volunteers who believed in the mission of creating a more just and peaceful world by bringing different cultures together. So our first exchanges actually began way back in 1951. But today, it's much different, and the AFS mission continues to respond to the needs of a very complex world. So we offer programs in more than 40 countries, and we also host international students from over 80 countries here in the US. And then finally, true to the spirit of those original ambulance drivers, these life-changing exchange experiences are made possible because of the dedicated work of volunteers, as well as volunteer host families who choose to welcome AFSers. So we have more than 2,600 volunteers in the US and more than 50,000 volunteers worldwide. Um, okay, so we also want to make sure that you have some context for where you are kind of at this point. So up until this point, you've been working with our study abroad team that you can see here on the screen. So we will remain your points of contact up until your family, your son or daughter's departure. And as you can see here, we have lots of experience that we draw from in terms of what makes us believe in the power of study abroad. But the purpose of tonight is to also introduce you to who will be supporting your family when your son or daughter is abroad. So we want to provide a warm welcome and introduction to our AFS Participant Support and Learning Department, who will be your points of contact, as I mentioned, during the program. So John is a member of that department. And John, I'll let you introduce yourself and kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Parker. So my name is John Hamill. I am a support specialist for the AFS-USA Support and Learning Department. Here you can see our wonderful team. We have a very diverse background in multiple different things, including education. Many of us are former teachers. We have a doctor of education, social workers, conflict mediators. Every single member of this team has lived, studied, or taught abroad at some point in their careers or in their lives. Every member of this team speaks at least one language besides English, many of whom are multilingual. And we also have three return Peace Corps volunteers on this team as well, including myself. So again, a very wide range of experiences, both living and teaching abroad. And I can confidently say every member of this team has experienced the same challenges, highs and lows, and culture shocks that your son or daughter will be experiencing while on their program this year.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. And we also want to introduce you to an AFS parent. So we are really, really excited and grateful to Sarah, who's actually the parent of an AFSer who's abroad right now. So, Sarah, would you like to say hello and tell us a little bit about your experience so far?
Yeah, so I was you about exactly a year ago, but my son Solomon, who's currently living in Latvia, is my oldest. So he was, kind of leaving home for the first time, and of course, there's some nerves associated with that. But I came to the AFS family as an exchange sister, well, host sister, I guess I should say, over 30 years ago. And my sister from Thailand is still one of my absolute best friends. To the extent that, she's the one that I call and vice versa if there's a family crisis or whatever. We're hosting a student right now, but I knew very quickly that this was going to be a life-changing experience for him. I would say probably by the third week of September, even some of the ways that he was thinking about his place in the world were just already expanding, and it was incredible to see. So I'm really excited for all of you to be on this journey. It's amazing.
Awesome. We are really thankful for your time, Sarah, because I think that your perspective is really so valuable. We're going to be kind of peppering some questions throughout tonight to you, and then also for audience members. If you have questions for Sarah, please feel free to direct them in the chat too. At the end, we'll have a dedicated Q&A, but we'll try and make sure we provide a framework for each kind of subject. But before we begin, Sarah, I want to ask you, before Solomon left, what helped you feel most prepared as a parent?
Yeah, preparing for something like this is a little daunting. We were fairly lucky in that as a family, we had had some international traveling experience before. So we were familiar with, visas and passports and how to pack and those kinds of logistical things. Obviously, not everyone has that experience. So even though we had that, we found that talking to returnees was actually really, really helpful and really comforting. Our regional, would you call it a region, World Flags region for AFS, hosted a sending orientation, I guess you would call it, for students and their families a couple of weeks before my son left. And there were fairly recent returnees there, one of whom had to change host families, which I think was just a huge fear of my son's, because he felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a failure if I have to change families. Because as host families ourselves, who have had students living with us, you kind of see all of those ups and downs. And he was just very nervous about that. And I think it was really comforting for him to hear, like, it does happen. And you can still have an amazing experience if you and your host family have, some kind of challenge or whatever. So that was really helpful. There were things that I think from a parent perspective just made me feel like, okay, he's got this. One of them was we had opened a credit card for him when he was 13. So that was the earliest at which we could do that, and had spent many years prior with him having a budget and going through how to manage money. And so then in preparation for him leaving, we spent time, we went to the bank and we talked about what would you do if there was a financial crisis and you didn't have cash, you've lost your wallet, whatever, and kind of went through some of those things. And that made me feel really good. And that was one of the things that he said was actually kind of mirrored some different situations that had happened to him. And having already walked through a plan of what do I do if this or that happens gave him a lot of confidence. I definitely think for his sake too, we really spent a lot of time making sure that he was really fluent with Google Maps. And making sure, knowing that he was going to probably be in a place where he would be able to travel about maybe independently or on the train or walking. A lot of AFS students are placed in city areas because that's where a lot of people live. So that's where volunteers are. So that's where placements happen, regardless of what country you're going to. And so he did have a lot of opportunities to use public transit. And I felt more comfortable knowing, okay, he knows how to get around. So that was good. And then also we had conversations before he left about what do you want to know while you're gone? If the cat dies, do you want us to tell you? If, if a friend dies, do you want to know? Do you not want to know? If someone gets sick, um, do you want to hear about what we're doing around the holidays? How are we going to know if that's something that's going to upset you? Do you want us, how do you want us to mark? He turned 16 while he was there. So how do you want us to mark this really special birthday? How do you want us to handle holidays? So we'd had those conversations, and knowing what was most important to him also gave us a lot of confidence, I think, as a family, knowing that we were following his wishes. Um, and, there were a lot of logistical things too. And I would really recommend this the week or so, maybe even 2 weeks prior, things will come up. You may need a last minute dentist appointment, or you may find out that someone just had a massive growth spurt and the pants that you bought that were 2 inches too long suddenly don't fit, and you need to make a quick, shopping trip, or different things like that. The luggage scale you were going to use broke. You kind of have to give yourself a buffer of the time beforehand. So if you're planning on doing, a last minute family whatever gathering or goodbye party or that kind of thing, give yourself some time in between those things before the actual departure day to deal with some of those last minute things. I think that was really helpful as well.
That's great. So I'm also hearing you that like it really opened up this almost a maturation of your own communication of like, let's talk.
Mhm.
What do you want to know? What do you not want to know? How do you want to
Yeah.
communicate? That's great.
Well, and
Um,
actually one of the things, and I will cherish this forever. The summer before he left, um, I would say, maybe 13, 14, early 15, he started to spend a lot more time with his friends very naturally. He'd gotten his first job. His cousin was driving. And the summer before he left, he became very aware that his time with us was maybe a bit more limited. And he suddenly wanted to do all the things that the younger siblings, he wanted to go to the zoo, he wanted to play the board game. He'd already had dinner with his friends, but we were eating as a family. He wanted to sit at the table with us. And so we had such incredible bonding time before he left. I didn't expect that. I'm sure everyone's different. But my husband and I realized that we really had to kind of prioritize time even more so as a family because it became so important for him. It was great.
that's great. That's great. Well, we really look forward to hearing more about kind of what that process was like. And we'll also start to jump into what that program is like too. So, John, I'll hand it back to you to provide a little bit more on kind of the theory of immersion.
Yeah, thanks, Parker. So, what is immersion? While on program, your child is going to live with a host family. They're going to be part of a local community, participate in a local school, and really experience this culture and this community as a local would. Our goal for our students is that they can fully engage in their local culture and gain a deep understanding of its values, customs, traditions. Students will participate in daily activities in the same way that locals do. Waking up in the morning, going to school, uh, you know, you know, participating in extracurricular activities, even sometimes
Awesome.
just hanging out in the living room and watching TV with their host family, maybe playing a board game. Um, they'll understand the ways that these people live in the communities in which they live. Everything will be conducted in the local language, which means that your child will be challenged. They will be independent, and they will grow and they will learn. And that this is meant to be an authentic experience where they will become a member of this community. So a few goals for the AFS program. So some major goals for any AFS program are, personal transformation, interpersonal communication, right? That's a big one. So often we think of, conflict as something to be avoided, and sometimes you have to, talk about some differences or talk about some challenges in order to navigate those communication challenges, and that's going to look different culture to culture. Intercultural knowledge, again, like gaining a baseline understanding and hopefully eventually an in-depth understanding of the culture in which you're living and experiencing. And then also a broader global awareness. Your students, not only will they be experiencing a new culture in their community, but they will also most likely, not always, but most likely be placed locally with exchange students from many other parts of the world as well, and understanding, again, the broader global community that we all live in. So AFS supports students in their learning journey by providing educational tools that enhance the cultural learning that takes place while abroad. Suspending judgments, managing differences, and self-exploration are all really, really important elements of maximizing the AFS experience. So this is I absolutely love this graphic because I think it does a really good job demonstrating kind of the ups and downs and the hills and valleys of any intercultural experience. And again, it looks a little bit like a roller coaster, right? There are going to be times where your student is feeling very well adjusted. They're feeling like I'm really getting the hang of this, or I'm really making a lot of progress in the local language. And there's going to be times where they're also profoundly challenged, right? There's going to be times where they might say, this is too hard, or this is just really, I'm having trouble making friends, or I'm having trouble at school in a second language, or again, I'm having trouble communicating effectively with my host family. And, again, your student will experience those ups and downs. But the reason I like this model or this graphic is I think it does a pretty good job of showing the average kind of cultural adjustment cycle that a lot of students experience. Of course, with the understanding that every student's experience is going to be nuanced, it's going to be unique. It might not look exactly like this, but this is a good kind of baseline to kind of help you understand where your child might be at over the course of the year. So starting out, we have arrival, right? The anticipation, the excitement of arriving in their host community for their first time, meeting their host family, maybe having that first meal in their host community. It's experiencing all of the newness and excitement that comes along with being in their host community. We find that is often quickly followed by a little bit of fatigue, right? Day 3, 4, maybe week 2, week 3, where that kind of initial excitement is wearing off a little bit. You're getting kind of into the swing of things. You're going to school. You're experiencing, as our students experience living life as a local, right? Sometimes that's not always going to be exciting. Sometimes that might even look a little mundane, right? You're coming home from school and you're doing homework, or you're just watching TV with your host family, and we can see that, especially oftentimes with doing all of those things in a new language, in a new cultural context, it can be tiring, it can be fatiguing, and that's where sometimes we see a little bit of homesickness seep in. But as your student adjusts, as they adapt, as they continue to learn the local language, we're going to see them grow in their confidence, feel a little bit more well adjusted. And that's going to lead to some deepening relationships, both the relationship that your child has with their host family, but also the relationships that they build at school between their peers and their classmates, and their place within a community, right? Um, they'll start learning the language. They'll be able to have, more than just a basic conversation in the local language. They'll understand local customs. They'll maybe getting a taste for the local food. And generally we see this occur around the middle point of the first semester, again, keeping in mind that everyone's experience is unique. Um, where we see kind of the first big blow, right, after kind of that initial fatigue is that first big culture shock, right? Maybe you felt like you really had a grasp on things, and then all of a sudden something happens, you commit a cultural faux pas, or you forget, you forget a few words in the language, and you kind of freeze up in class, or maybe there's a dish that your host family cooks every Tuesday that you really don't like, and you can't stomach it. Maybe you were feeling well adjusted, and then all of a sudden that feeling can kind of go away, and you're like, oh my goodness, there is so much more that I have to learn. Um, and that's where we see, students really start to get past the surface level culture, right? Maybe they had this understanding of the surface level, and then all of a sudden they experience a deeper part of culture that kind of shakes them a little bit. And generally this happens around the halfway point of program, which also coincides with the holidays, which Sarah, I'm so happy you brought that up. It can be a challenging time for many of our students over the course of their year, because generally it is the halfway point. And it's a time where they might be missing home. They might be missing, family traditions back in the United States. Um, and then in the second semester, this is where we see a lot of that real cultural adjustment, personal growth, cultural understanding, and students really finding themselves and finding their niche within their local community. And that is quickly followed by, again, perhaps another low, preparing to return to the United States, right? And all of the bittersweet feelings that go along with thinking, man, I was just getting the knack for this, or I was just really starting to feel like a member of this host family, or I was just really starting to excel at school, and now I have to go back, right? So and again, every child's experience is going to be different, but this is a pretty good roadmap for some of the ups and downs that your child might experience throughout the course of their year. This is just another way to visualize, again, those ups and downs. Things are going to be stressful. You're going to slowly adjust to that stress, adjust to, the cultural context. You'll feel like you're getting a hang of it, and then you'll encounter something new, and that new thing will be stressful. And it will, you'll learn and you'll grow, and hopefully by the end of your child's program, they're going to feel kind of towards the end of this graphic, where they're feeling more adapted than they are stressed.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And we share these visualizations. They might have you might look back in 4 months and say, oh, this is really not what we're experiencing, or it might be spot on. But it's really just a way to emphasize kind of how the emotions of the experience can oscillate depending on where you are. And so we want a next transition of saying, okay, so now that I know that the emotion might be going high or low, John, my next question is, what can parents do during a high point when you receive a call or something, or a text from your son or daughter, and you're like, flying high? Like, what recommendations do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, celebrate the wins. Even if it's as small as, you learned a new word in class today, or you discovered a new food that you really like. Celebrate those accomplishments, because they might seem small, but when you are in a new cultural context, when everything around you is new, those wins feel massive. Um, and then not just acknowledging the wins, but asking your child to reflect on them as well, right? This is a program all about learning and growth. And so, it could be journaling, writing down those accomplishments, what worked, what didn't work. It can just be talking about, again, what worked, what didn't work. Encourage them to express gratitude to their host family, their friends, their volunteers, community, etc. Um, Again, these are all volunteers. None of these folks are getting paid for what they do. Oftentimes they do it because they share a love for these types of intercultural experiences the same way that your child does. And they want to get to know someone from a different part of the world, and they want to be able to share their own culture with someone from a different part of the world. Um, Again, celebrate those small victories. Simple things can sometimes feel very profound when everything is so new. And encourage them to stay resilient when they do face challenges and to remember those highs.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, we emphasize kind of those small victories because you might hear something that sounds pretty minor. They might say, well, I didn't get lost on my way to my classroom today. And you're like, well, that sounds like relatively concerning, but it means a lot when you're immersed in the experience and they're actively learning. In the previous slide, we used the word stress, but that simply means like your body's reaction to difference. And so it means a lot when they can do these small things because it's great to kind of puff them up, acknowledge how hard they actually worked for that. Sarah, I want to ask you, like, during Solomon's highs, like, what have you kind of done for yourself or Solomon? What has your experience been like?
Um, this is excellent. I think absolutely everything on this slide are the exact things that I would have also echoed and what Solomon himself would have said. But one of the things that I tried so hard to encourage him to do was to keep a journal. And he was not interested. But then a friend of ours gifted him a journal and was explaining why, when she was living in Korea, this was so helpful. And in preparation for tonight, I had asked him about what were some of, the most helpful, most important things that you think that you did. And he said, by far and away, keeping the journal. And he said, now that he's, kind of coming towards the end of his program, I think it's even more meaningful. But he said, I was able to, when I was very low, I was able to then look back at the times that I'd had these amazing successes and remind myself that I got through it. And so he's like, now that I'm kind of coming up on the end of the program, I look at all these things and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I got through that. And that's kind of presenting him with this new, very high point of success for himself. A lot of things that, like, you were saying are maybe kind of trivial, but now he can look back and go, wow, at the time that really was a big deal. So yeah, just great. And I think one of the things both with lows and highs is to just not have an opinion, I guess, as a parent. It's their journey, it's their experience. Don't tell them what to do. It doesn't have to be super congratulatory. Just let them have that moment. Let them struggle through it. Let them celebrate it. You're just kind of listening. Wow, that sounds really hard. That sounds amazing. um, but yeah, I guess just be a little bit more hands off, even with the highs, and just let them have that moment with their family.
Definitely, definitely. Um, and on the flip side, uh, John, I'm wondering if you can share what advice or what recommendations do you have when you detect that your son or daughter is at a low point? What advice or recommendations do you have?
Yeah. Yeah, and Sarah, thank you so much. I think that was wonderful advice, and it leads into this slide very, very well, which is, when your student is experiencing a low, you are an ocean away. And so, of
Of
course,
course.
listen to their challenges, hear them out, provide moral support, but also, understand that the resources best equipped to help them through that challenge are almost always going to be local, right? So their host family or their local support volunteers or AFS staff in the country in which they're doing their program. Those are going to be the people who are best equipped to really help guide them through those challenges and who understand the cultural context of the challenges that they might be encountering. Um, so again, redirecting to local supports if they are encountering something challenging, but also, affirming that communication with the host family, the liaison, the local support structure, saying, again, when we talk about celebrating wins, celebrating also, newfound levels of independence. If they reached out on their own proactively to talk about something that's really been bothering them, or something they've been really finding challenging with a local support volunteer or a teacher or a host family member, that's a massive step. And something I think to be commended, and something, again, that host families can really, you know, um, give their students kudos for doing, for again taking those steps to be proactive in tackling those challenges. Again, Sarah, you brought up the journaling. I think it is a wonderful idea and a great way for students to help think through their challenges, right? Because when we're encountering something new, the first gut instinct might be, I don't like that. That makes me uncomfortable. I want to remove myself from the situation, or I want to, say no to this new experience, or I don't want anything to do with this. It just feels uncomfy, right? And sometimes it takes time to think through why you're feeling that way, right? And writing that down can be a great way of doing that. So, is making friends at school challenging, right? Or do you feel uncomfortable maybe trying to reach out to new people and initiate conversations, right, in a second language, which again is so tough. Writing that down and really thinking it through and thinking about what about that makes you uncomfortable, or that you find challenging, can be a great way for students to again grow and learn throughout the course of their experience. Um, Here are some wonderful questions that again you can ask your student if they do ever call you with experiencing challenges or discomfort, which is, have you talked to your host family about it? Have you talked to your local volunteers? What steps are you taking to approach this challenge? Again, have you taken time to write it down? Have you spoken to anyone about it? Have you really thought about what specifically is making you uncomfortable? Do you think there's a cultural aspect to this challenge, right? Because again, sometimes our gut instinct is, well, this person is being mean, right? Or this person said something rude. And perhaps there could just be a different communication style in that culture, right? And we actually have a slide on that, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. But some cultures are more high context, direct or indirect communicators. Others are more low context, direct communicators, right? So if a host family, maybe they keep reminding you to do chores or reminding you to wake up on time for school or do your homework, maybe they don't feel like they're getting on to you or hounding you about those things. Maybe they're just coming from a culture where, again, it's more acceptable to have that more direct communication style. So again, thinking about what cultural differences might be at play here. Is there a past experience that you can draw upon to help you navigate these challenges? I I always like to remind people that every single one of you, regardless of whether or not you have ever traveled abroad, have experienced culture shock, and you have experienced new cultures, right? Whether that be changing schools, transitioning from like middle school to high school, changing jobs, for you parents, perhaps going to college or going into the workforce for the first time. Those are all examples of times where you have had to face a significant shift in culture, and your student as well is most likely at some point in their lives experience that shift in culture again, whether even if it's just going from middle school to high school, right? So encouraging them to think back at what they've done in those situations where they've experienced culture shock can be really, really helpful. And then also asking, what actions are you taking to help improve the situation, and having them reflect on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's one thing about kind of the immersion long-term experience is that the same kind of highs and lows that they'll have here in the United States, they will also have abroad. So think about kind of what advice you might typically give them. But I think those questions that John just shared can be particularly helpful for helping them navigate things that you really don't have a good answer for if you just don't necessarily feel like you know what good advice to give because you imagine there is something cultural at play. And so that's why we also make sure that we have kind of a local network that they can go to translate that culture a bit. Also, as a big advocate of journals, it's a great time to go tell them, go read your journal from those high points. You can get there again. You can do that. Sarah, I'd love to hear your perspective too. During low points, like how have you reacted and what advice do you have?
Yeah, it's so hard to be, an ocean away. But at the same time, it's a good thing to remind yourself that you would not be sending your child on this journey if you didn't already know that they could do it. You already have faith that they are very capable and that they're resourceful and that they're independent and they're responsible, or you wouldn't be, on this call right now. So it's a good idea, I think, to always remind yourself of all those skills that your child left with, that you believe in them. We had a lot of conversations just constantly with Solomon leading up to his trip, like, just saying, you're going to be great. And you say it until you believe it. And you just keep telling them, you've got this, you can do this. Um, One thing I don't recommend, and I know this, and I knew that I shouldn't be doing it, but it's that mother bear instinct, I think. So your child, gets on a plane and then you don't hear from them for a good long while and you don't know if they've arrived and where they're at and hoping everything's fine. And the first couple days, typically in most programs, there's a little bit of an orientation somewhere before they meet up with the host family. So there's a little bit of lag time, and then they meet with the host family, and then, they're getting settled. So it's one shock after another. They're exhausted. Traveling has been draining, and they're overwhelmed. And you're going to get there and be, frustrated. Um, my son was in a very unique position, I think, compared to some students, in that he didn't speak a word of Latvian. And we tried. I mean, try finding an app, that has Latvian as a language that you can study prior. And his host parents did not speak a word of English. So he arrived into this family with absolutely no ability to communicate with anybody outside of Google Translate. And of course, when he first arrived, his phone didn't work, and because that wasn't set up. And so the first couple days were very, very low. And for me too, not hearing, not knowing. And then, we'd get a couple emails. We had WhatsApp set up. And so pretty quickly we had a couple communication opportunities. But we had said pretty firmly, like, don't call us. I know that sounds mean and that sounds rude, but it's like, this is not good for you. It's not good for us. Outside of letting us know that you're okay, any problems that you have, we cannot help with from here. What would we do? Quite frankly, we don't know the language, we don't know the culture, we don't understand what's going on. So, kind of all those questions that John had mentioned, these are things that you have to do on your own, but you can. And one of the lowest points, I would say, for him was he's a big as a volunteer, I see it a lot with kids. I feel like it's around October, like late October. Kids start to get sick. It's the excitement's kind of worn off. It's a really long time till they're going to go home, and they're just exhausted from translating everything all the time. And for Solomon, he also is a big hunter. And that was something, big culture thing for our family that he was missing out on. He was missing his birthday. He loves Halloween. He loves Thanksgiving. These aren't holidays that exist in other places. So That kind of compounded for a fairly low period. And it also coincided with when he had a fall break from school for a week. And I don't know how specific visa requirements work in a lot of places, but for him, what the entry point was is you enter with a 90-day tourist visa, and during that 90 days then you have to go, you have an appointment, you have to go in by yourself, you have to answer questions in the local language about yourself. So he's very nervous about this, going like, I don't speak Latvian, like I have to completely rely on the translator to be able to help me. He had all this very important paperwork that he had to go to do. So he was very nervous about this appointment. And he kept saying, like, what if they don't let me stay? Because then you have to get your student visa that allows you to stay for the rest of the time, which was the likelihood of this was like zero, but it was a very legitimate worry for him. And with the fall break coming up, his host family, he is in a family with 8 siblings, and then himself, mom and dad, and then they have a maid. So big family. And they were all going on a trip to Lithuania. And his host mom is she's not technologically savvy. And a lot of the things that had to be done for his visa application had to be done online. And he does not speak Latvian. And his host mom, again, does not speak English. So they're trying to communicate about this very complicated paperwork to get his visa, which he had to have in order to be able to go on the family vacation. And his host mom made some errors on the form. And the first time it was denied. And he was not able to get the student visa in time to go on the family trip to Lithuania because he couldn't leave the country of Latvia. And so he had to stay behind with his mom and his youngest host brother. His youngest host brother has some pretty significant special needs. And he tantrums wildly and hits and kicks and bites. And that was just, he was locking himself in the bathroom and just to kind of drown out the noise. And he was so upset about being left behind. And he was kind of using that language of like, they just didn't care about me enough to do this application, and they're taking all the other kids and I'm left behind. And I kept saying over and over again, you don't find what you're not looking for. So right now, I need you to look for and focus on all of the evidence that you can muster that your host family loves you and cares about you and is trying to take care of you. So that's what I want you to journal about. And I want you to make lists of all the things that they are doing to support you. Did they fill out the application? Did they go with you to the appointment? Did they do it again when they made the mistake? Did they try to get it done on time? Did they make a plan for you when you weren't able to go along? And then it was kind of like, well, yeah, okay. They did do all those things. And so just constantly trying to reframe it as you have to focus on the evidence that they are doing their best and trying to help you. I think one of the most rewarding things for me as a mom, but then also I found out later for Solomon, was just a couple of weeks ago. And I should preface this by saying I can count on one hand the number of times that I have spoken to him by phone since he's left. So we don't have a lot of communication back and forth. So it's really delightful to hear sometimes what's going on because I don't know. But I found out from a recent phone call because he had spring break. And so the time zones aligned really well that we could have a nice long phone call with him. And he shared that he ended up having to, as was mentioned, there's a lot of AFS events that occur. Latvia is a very small country. So when AFS has their support sessions, all of the students from all over the world that are placed in Latvia all get together and they've formed this really incredible bond. And he's able to travel to Riga by bus, which is about 4 hours each way independently. And they all meet up in Riga and get together on the weekends. So like he said, on a Saturday, I can get on the 6 o'clock bus. I can be there by 10. We can spend the day together. I got to get on the 6 o'clock bus so that I'm back home by 10 o'clock at night. And I can, spend the day with my friends. And he had an AFS event that was planned, and due to a number of unforeseen circumstances, he was not able to take the bus to get there. He had to take the train, and he had never independently taken the train before. He'd only ever independently taken the bus. And after he got on the train, he realized when they were too far from the station for him to still purchase an online ticket, that the ticket that he had bought was not going to take him all the way to where he needed to go. And he had been on the train before when he had seen them kick off people at the station to which they purchased the ticket, many of which are very rural. So it's not an actual station. It's just you're getting off the train kind of in a field and hoping that there's a car there to pick you up. And what was great about this is he's telling me this after it happened. It had been like 2 weeks prior. And he said, I was so panicked. I didn't know what to do. I got up and he says, Mom, when I'm nervous, I have to pee. You know that. I said, yes, I know. So I got up, I went to the bathroom, and he said, I realized I got to take my bag because it has my passport. It has all my stuff in it. He went to the bathroom, came back. Someone else had taken his seat and refused to move. And so now he doesn't have a ticket. He doesn't have a seat. He's wandering on the train, kind of by himself. And I said, wow, like that sounds really stressful. What did you do? And he said he called his host mom right away. And it was the first time that he had been able to have a very important phone conversation in general with his host mom in Latvian. And she was able to talk him through what to do and who to go talk to and how to handle the situation. And he was able to, get to where he needed to go. And he was so, so proud of himself. And I thought, what an incredible transformation from, the kid that's so upset that he wants me to like fix this situation, in October about a visa in a language I don't speak from, thousands of miles away, to a kid who was just scared out of his mind because he was alone on a train in the middle of rural Latvia, to figure out, okay, this is who I'm going to call. This is how I'm going to handle this. And, had done it completely independently in a language that he did not even speak until a couple of months ago. And I was just so blown away by that maturity. And even just to think about him, traveling all over by himself and the pride that he felt in his ability to handle it. And I thought, man, if I would have jumped in, if he would have called me from the train, I think I would have been panicked too. I was like, I don't know what to do, but the fact that he just felt so confident and capable was just so incredible. It's just so proud at the transformation. But I think those kinds of things only happen if you can be very insistent that this is something that you can solve on your own. If it's not an immediate safety concern, like you can do this. You've got this.
Oh, what an incredible story, Sarah. And kudos to you and kudos to Solomon. I think that's, it's a good representation that we don't design the program for that to happen. We want to make sure that doesn't
Mhm.
happen, right? But for 4 to 10 months, things do happen. And so I think you've
Mhm.
really illustrated kind of that idea, which can be really hard as a parent, to move from like I'm going to fix this for you, but to like I'm going to coach you. Like how do I coach you in that? So
Mhm.
it sounds like you were really good in terms of providing that framework. So thank you for sharing that incredible story. We'll
Yeah,
have
and I
more to.
will. Oh, I was just going to say, I will say as a side note, one of the things that we did give into early on, when again, he's not speaking the language, he's feeling very isolated, all of those kinds of things. it became very apparent, especially during that low period in October, early November, that he just desperately wanted to watch an American football game. Like, and it
Mhm.
was like, and we just kind of felt like that's really going to buoy him. You just kind of had this sense that that's what he needed, but without you can't get where he lives, you can't get American television, and he couldn't sign into our networks back home because then they know that you're out of the country and you only get the local stations. So we bought the bullet and we purchased a VPN for him so that the towers think that you're in the US. And I think it was like $50 a month or something. And so we got that for him as his kind of birthday, early Christmas gift. And it was like, here's a year's worth of television in English. And it made him so happy. The downside to that is he could always get the games before we could. So we had to say, you got to stop calling the family and telling them who lost this, whatever, or who won, because nobody likes that.
The downsides of the
Yeah.
spoiler. That's great. Yeah. Running towards things that are familiar can be both beneficial and detrimental too, like where
Yeah.
you're like
Yeah.
it's a comfortable thing. And so I think you might find that your AFSer is like running like needs a little bit of comfort, or sometimes they might be too comfortable. They might be
Mhm.
sticking only to American television or sticking only to English and things like that. So I think finding that balance and be like, I think what you need is an antidote of the NFL. And that goes a long way. Awesome. Well, we will have more opportunities to chat more, but we also want to make sure we have a framework for some of the when we talk about these cultural differences. What does that kind of look like? And perhaps even the way that Sarah, you framed this really well in talking about Solomon's perception of his host mother, who tried her best, and beyond her control, something wasn't didn't happen in the way that anyone wanted. But there are different ways of looking at and expressing, maybe regret. Maybe here in the US, we'd be like, I am so sorry that the visa didn't work. I really tried my best, and I just want to let you know that I did my best. But in Latvian culture, it might be like, I tried, and I'm not going to talk about it. You saw what I did. So they can communicate different messages. John, I'm wondering if you can chat more about kind of like what you see on program from like perhaps how conflict can occur from cultural differences.
Yeah, absolutely. So not only is your child going to be communicating in a new language, they're going to be communicating in a new cultural communication style as well, right? And that might look more indirect than what they're used to. That might look more direct than what they're used to. No culture is a monolith. It might be different. I mean, the way they communicate with their family might look different from their friend down the street and how they communicate with their family. Um, Actually, in the interest of time, I won't go too much into this, but I do want to share an anecdote, a story of one of our students who was on program a few years ago with you all, and because I think it's a great example of where communication can break down in terms of like direct versus indirect. And this was a student who was struggling to keep their room clean, right? As I think many teenagers struggle with that challenge. And they were in a culture of very indirect, what we would call high context communicators, right? Where you need a lot of cultural context to understand what is being communicated with you, whether it's an understanding of the local body language, an understanding of local customs, and kind of reading between the lines, right? And this is not a host mom who's going to go to the student and say, clean up your room, it's a pigsty, right? They're going to communicate this more subtly. And so what they had done for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks was say, you know, they would tell a story. They would say, when I was growing up, my mom would always get really angry at me when I had a messy room. And the student, perhaps coming from a more direct communication culture, thought to themselves, okay, great, good story, mom, wonderful. Always good to hear about your childhood. And they weren't putting two and two together that what she was doing was she was commenting on the state of their room and giving them a very subtle hint to maybe pick up a little bit better after themselves, right? And we can see the opposite of that, right? We can see, perhaps your child is used to a more indirect communication style, and they're going to be really feeling that culture shock when, German host mom comes in through the door and says, your room is a mess, you need to clean it up right now, and is just very direct, right? So we see these differences in the way that we communicate, the way that we express opinions, and the way that we tackle interpersonal conflicts and challenges. Um, and again, it's not just the language, it's not just the food we eat or the clothes we wear that are culture. It's how we interact with one another. And those things that are below the surface level are oftentimes kind of the hardest things to get used to.
Totally, totally. So we could chat much longer, I think, about like how cultural play into it. But that's a great example, John, of like within the context of the host country, this was as clear as it's going to get. And you may have also raised one of your family values might be like, hey, don't beat around the bush. Talk, say what you mean. That might be bad advice, and depending on the host culture. So it's one of those things where, to put into context, one of John's leading questions for when you're at that low point, going to that cultural perspective, and if you feel like it may be that way, the local liaison, the AFS staff can provide that context of being a translator of that culture, saying, depending on what you just told me, John, about, your grandmother's way of communicating a dirty room, you got to clean your room. That is not going to get any more direct than that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're gonna, in the interest of time, we're gonna chat more about some on-program concerns. So John, I'm wondering if you can chat about some of the most common concerns that you see at the
Yeah.
participant support and learning level.
Yeah. And Sarah, I think you spoke a little bit to this, and I'm also seeing some questions about this in the chat. But this first bullet, conflict with the host family, it's going to happen. There are going to be interpersonal conflicts, and I think sometimes we think of conflict as a dirty word, something to be avoided at all costs. It's not. That doesn't have to be the case. Sometimes we need those disagreements, those times where we don't see eye to eye, to better understand one another, to learn, right, to grow. And so I'm just gonna come out and say it. Your child almost certainly will experience at some point over the course of this program some sort of disagreement or interpersonal conflict with their host family. Um, I'm sure your own family occasionally experience interpersonal conflict, right? Siblings disagree occasionally. Teenagers can talk back, right? These are things that are kind of just the norm. They happen. Of course, there's a productive way to then deal with that interpersonal conflict. But if your student reaches out and they say, like me and host mom, we're really just not seeing eye to eye, or my host sister does this or my host brother does that, and it just really bugs me. Just keeping in mind that this is a normal part of being a part of a family. And we always want to encourage students to address these interpersonal conflicts in a productive and culturally appropriate way. And oftentimes that means going to their local support volunteers to ask, hey, there's this thing that bugs me. Can you help me address it? Like, is this normal? Is there a way I can talk to my host family about this? So again, always encouraging them to lean on their local supports. Another common concern is homesickness. Again, it's one of those things that I will say most likely will occur at some point over the course of your student's program, especially if this is their first time living away from home. They will occasionally be homesick. And it's really how we help coach them and support them in dealing with that challenge is where it really matters. So again, if they're really homesick and they just want to be on the phone all day with friends and family back home might not be the most productive way to deal with that homesickness. Actually, counterintuitively, we see that tends to increase homesickness.
And that's
Whereas,
where I will say that's why we were like, don't, we're not going to call you, don't call us. But
yeah.
again, I would bring up the journaling again. That was something that Solomon said, you know what, if I felt like I had to call home, I would journal every night before bed instead, and then see in the morning if I still really needed to talk to somebody. And a lot of times he didn't. Journal, journal, journal.
Yeah. So again, what we often see is that over communication can counterintuitively increase the homesickness, right? Because you're hearing more about what's going on, you're getting more and more homesickness. Whereas having a healthy balance of communication with home, no one is telling you not to communicate with your child, right? But finding a healthy balance and finding what works for you and your child in terms of whether it be weekly biweekly, monthly communication and checkups, that having that kind of structure can be very, very helpful. Um, Also, the academic year, academics in general, again, they're going to school in a new cultural context in a new country in a second language, and we often find that teachers might have differing expectations on how quickly they adjust to that new classroom or that new second language. And it can be a real challenge. And again, just continuing to encourage your students and asking them to lean on those local supports when they need help. Um, Making friends, right, at school. There's a social aspect to this program as well, where we want them to be a part of this community. We want them to be going out and making friends. Like that is a massive, valuable part of any AFS experience. But it can be hard in a second language. It can be hard. I mean, anyone who's ever changed schools, even here in the States, can tell you it can be a challenging experience. Of course, behavioral issues. Although these are generally few and far between, we are talking about teenagers here, right? Teenagers make mistakes. Hopefully they learn from those mistakes. But there are at times there are situations where a student might break more than just a cultural rule. And in those cases, we might need to discuss kind of next steps from there. And then, of course, medical concerns. We will always be in touch with you if there are any medical concerns involving your child, whether it be, a hospitalization for something like flu or COVID to broken bones. I mean, these are young people participating in sports. We see sports injuries every year, but of course, we will always be getting in touch with you when there's reason for like a student to visit a doctor, or if they've been out of school for a significant amount of time due to illness or anything like that.
Awesome. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, John, I'll let you take it from there.
All right. So I think that leads us kind of nicely into this next slide, which is when will you hear from us? And I would like just to preface this by saying no news is good news, right? If you're not hearing from me, it's probably because your child is doing really well, and there's no reason for us to really discuss what's going on in their program, right? They're doing well in school, they're adjusting well in their host family. They're keeping you updated, and there's no reason for us to be, talking about challenges. Not to say that if you hear from me that it's a bad thing or that it's like a massive problem. We will be getting in touch with you for certain issues. Again, whether there's maybe some minor conflicts with the host family, medical issues, that sort of thing. Of course, you might be hearing from me, and also we want to hear from you, right? If you have any questions or concerns, we want to be hearing from you as well. The for as far as travel goes, we will not be confirming their arrival. Also, please keep in mind that when they first arrive in country, they may not have cell service. They may not have Wi-Fi. They may not have the ability to reach out to you immediately, like within 5 minutes of when their plane is scheduled to land. Please don't be alarmed if you don't hear from your student for a few hours upon their first arrival in program. I promise you, we will let you know if there are any changes to their flights, if there are any delays, if there's any, rerouting of their flight, anything like that, we will let you know. Otherwise, please feel free to safely assume that they've arrived at their destination safely. Um, Also, travel medical insurance, if there's any issues with the local insurance, or again, if the student for whatever reason needs to see a doctor, we'll be getting in touch with you as well. So this is our chain of communication. You see yourselves at the bottom here, the dark blue arrow, parent and or legal guardian. Just because you're at the bottom does not mean you are not important. In fact, again, I want to emphasize we want to hear from you. We want you to reach out with any questions or concerns. This is just a way that can help us visualize what this chain of communication looks like. Again, on the student's end, we're going to want to encourage them to talk to their host family, talk to their local contact person, their local liaison. It's not because they're not allowed to talk to you or you to them. It's just because we know, with you being an ocean away, the people best equipped to help them with any immediate concerns or any immediate challenges. And of course, the people who are best culturally equipped to help them deal with those challenges are going to be those local supports, their host family, their local contact, a teacher. And then on your end, myself or one of my colleagues in the AFS support and learning department, we will be your primary point of contact. So again, we want to hear from you with any questions or concerns, anything that you want to just discuss. Maybe if there's something you're like, I'm not sure if this is, my student is telling me this, I'm not sure if it's normal, I'm not sure if it's cultural. I really would just appreciate talking it through with someone. We are here for you. You can reach out to us at any time from 9 to 5. And then, of course, after hours, we always have our emergency duty line available to you as well. So we are always available to you 24/7 to discuss or to address any questions or concerns that you might have. But again, it's on your end, we here at AFS-USA will be your primary point of contact. And then in turn, communicating with our partners at the AFS program in which the country in which they're in, and they will be communicating with their local volunteers and their local support resources.
Well, and Jen, one thing that I think I hear a lot from parents that I've seen personally and can be really frustrating is that because there are so many different layers
Mhm.
of AFS, you may be getting contacted by people that you have no idea who they are or why they're contacting you. And sometimes the phone number doesn't, if it is by phone, the phone number isn't necessarily one, that you recognize. So you may not pick it up. And then you realize, oh, I should have, answered for this or that. Usually it's going to be by email, I would say was my experience anyways, unless there's an emergency. But one way I think to put it in perspective is just to remember that these are partnerships between two different countries with two different cultures, two different languages, and two different time zones. And so sometimes if there is an emergency and it feels like, why is this person calling me and not this person? And why do they know something and they don't? These are all communication agreements that have been formed in a very diplomatic way. And especially if students are on scholarships, sometimes there's State Department pieces involved. And so I do hear from parents sometimes like, who is this person and why do they know this about my child? And I think you just have to remind yourself that it's part of so many different layers of negotiation that goes on between two different countries that it feels a little bit frustrating sometimes, but it's really all meant for the good of the student.
Yeah, and I completely recognize that at a glance, this communication structure, it might look like a big game of telephone, right? But Sarah, to your point, the reason we have it set up this way is to help us cross those communication gaps, not just language, right, but also culture. So, maybe the host family thinks, oh, this isn't a big deal, right? But the student feels like, oh, this feels like a big deal to me. How do we communicate then effectively? Okay, what part of this is cultural? What part of it is maybe not cultural, what might part of it might be interpersonal conflicts, and having kind of these multiple steps where, I'm speaking to my colleagues in this country who have a grasp on the local culture and who understands the local culture. It really helps us again determine what might be more culturally causing some issues or causing some challenges versus what might be interpersonal communication, what might be just, different ideas of like time management, for example, right? In some cultures, you're expected to be quite punctual, and others, it's like, well, I was 15 minutes late. What's the big deal? So by having the structure of, your local or your student communicating with their local supports, and then you communicating with your local supports, which is us here in the United States, it really helps us bridge those cultural gaps. Yeah.
And I'll also note that this is designed that, let AFS be the bad guy, so to speak. If you have a need for your child that you feel isn't being met, it's can be counterproductive to go directly to their host family, for example. It can kind of make things culturally sensitive. So come to AFS, and then this is how we can make sure that we deliver communication in a context-rich and culturally informed environment so that you can get your message across without having to worry about kind of how to deliver it in a cultural perspective.
Yep.
Um, we have a couple more slides tonight. I apologize, we are running a little bit behind. We will be sending recordings, so if you do need to hop, we won't judge you at all. But our next question is, John, like, what advice do you have for support for supporting a parent's experience?
Yeah, absolutely. In the interest of time, I'll kind of run through these fairly quickly, but if I could have you have one big takeaway from this evening about what your experience will look like, is it might closely mirror your students, right? You are going to feel some of those ups and downs, some of those highs and lows as well. You might even feel homesick in a way, right? Missing your child while they're on this exchange. And those, of course, are really valid feelings. And again, you might be feeling those same, just like your student has their ups and downs, you might be feeling those same highs and lows. We definitely want to encourage you to learn as much about your students' local customs and culture as you can. Maybe even coordinate cooking a dish, or maybe your student or your child can give you a recipe from their host family. Recognize your child's growth throughout this process. They're going to be learning a lot. They're going to be growing and becoming independent in ways that you might not even have imagined prior to them departing on this program. Encourage them. So again, celebrate those wins. Um, Limit communication. Again, I just want to emphasize, we're not telling you not to talk to your child. What we're saying is find those healthy balances. Set up a structure to that communication. Maybe it's instead of just texting any time of day like we normally would back home, like setting up that like hour a week call, right? Or that maybe we only text on Saturdays. Having that structure can be really, really helpful to allow your student to adjust locally. Um, Feelings of crisis, again, big or small, can occur while your child is on program. Sarah, you had some incredible examples in your stories about your son. Um, and Another kind of big takeaway is that your student's experience is not going to be better or worse from home. It's going to be different. Maybe they'll get overseas and they'll say, oh, it's just so, it's so hard here. They don't have any of the food I like. They're very strange. It's not what I'm used to. That's bad, right? We want to avoid those types of value statements. They might on the other end of things say, this is incredible. This is so cool. I love it here. It's so much better than the States. That's also, right, making a value statement. It's best just to recognize that it's different, and that's not better, that's not worse. It's just different. It's a new experience. Um, And then again, expect to see changes in your child, especially upon their return. I can tell you from experience, and Sarah, I know you discussed that your son is kind of coming up to this realization, getting close to his return date. But I can tell you from experience, reverse culture shock can be as hard, if not harder, than initial culture shock. Coming back to the United States might feel like a real challenge. It might feel like you're having to do all of that culture shock that you did at the beginning of your program all over again, but with kind of the added complication of, well, this is your home, right? And having to go back into school and reconnect with friends that maybe you haven't spoken to in a year. Get used to, even if it's a diet that you're familiar with, a diet that you grew up with, it's going to be different ingredients than perhaps you were used to for the past year. That can have all sorts of complications on eating and everything. So it's hard to get back into the swing of things when you return home. Again, reverse culture shock, very real and very challenging. So expect to see these changes, and also expect it to take a minute for your student to kind of readjust to life back in the States.
That's great. And the one note that I'll say is that you have all worked really hard to provide a great life and experience, and sometimes for your family, and sometimes it'll be like everything back home stinks. Everything's better here. So just develop a tough skin, and you will get kind of those highs and lows. It might be the opposite, but just don't take it personal when there's a sense of euphoria about kind of the host country and culture. Sarah, I have a couple more questions, but I'll save them for the Q&A section at the very end generally. Um, and so here is, as John mentioned, he's provided some context and illustration for the chain of communication and contacting the participant support and learning department. And so once your child is on program, meaning that they've left the country or are in the process of leaving the country, you can contact the support department in three ways. The first one is this email. This will be sent to you about 10 days prior to your scheduled international departure. So you don't have to write this down, but we want to let you know this is how you contact us. A shared email is the first way of letting us know that you have a concern or would like follow up, or just want to know how people are doing. You can also call the participant support and learning line as well. And then also, John had mentioned the duty officer. So this is that 24/7, 365 line that is that we ask you reserve it for emergencies if the health and well-being of your son or daughter is in question. So that is a line you can always call as well for an emergency. As we wrap up tonight, I imagine you will have lots of questions. So we'd love to hear from you. If you do have a question, we want to make sure we can give you a good answer. So in your AFS application dashboard, you can chat your specialist. That's the best, easiest way. But you can also email us at studyabroad@afsusa.org or call us at the number listed here. I'll show this again. For visa questions, sending visas at afsusa.org, travel questions, AFS travel. I'll show these on our last slides. You don't need to write them down. But we do want to emphasize that within your AFS dashboard, there is what we call the help in learning for study abroad students and parents. So you can access this through the AFS dashboard. It's also sent via email, but this is kind of your AFS-USA guidebook. So questions about before you depart, there are lists of articles. If you have questions about banking, for example, you can type bank and it will show any article that references it. Or during your stay, things like that. All countries will also have a country resource. So if you're looking for the AFS Handbook to Austria, click on country resources, and then you can find all of the resources for Austria. We really recommend that you review them. They will have the best advice that we can provide. That is written by our partners as well. Finally, some common questions that we typically get cell phones. So, using a US phone plan abroad can be expensive. So we recommend that you consult with your current carrier, understand what is offered and available. So it changes phone plan to family, but many families do unlock their child's phone. So I would ask your carrier, is it possible to unlock my phone to accept an international SIM card? Then the AFSer in country will purchase a local SIM card and insert that into their phone, and that way you don't have to pay a US phone plan for international service. This works very well. Also, depending on your country, some students will use a prepaid phone plan that can be set up locally and often with host family support. So these are two options that many of our students will do. I will note that, like here in the U.S., where AT&T might not be what everyone has because there's no service and everyone has Verizon, that will also apply to your location in your host country. So once you do get connected with your host family, this is a great question to ask. Because they can provide you with what they use, and that will be kind of what you'll want to mimic. But I will say it was really helpfully chatted or shared in the chat too. But WhatsApp is a great resource to get comfortable using right now. So Wi-Fi based messaging services, WhatsApp, Signal. If you're going to China, WeChat is essential. Or FaceTime. These don't require a plan, and so as long as they're on Wi-Fi, you can use that as a messaging service. So we really recommend that you review kind of what works for your family. Some families want to have that US plan that can be, accessible throughout their entire experience. That's also perfectly fine. But those are some recommendations that we have. And I also recommend within your AFS handbook for your host country, they will have a specific paragraph and section about phone plans that's relevant to each one of your countries. So I recommend you look into those, and and if you don't find a good answer, please reach out to us. We'd love to make sure we can connect you with that. Finally, banking. It's a really important one for families. So, I think Sarah already gave really good advice in the chat, but making sure you have a debit card that works internationally, and understanding what those charges are. So some families will want to choose a low or very low foreign transaction fee, and kind of stick with the strategy. So it might cost $20 to go to an ATM and take money out. Often using an ATM is your most competitive conversion rate, but you will get charged typically something by your US bank. So just understand what that charge is and work out a strategy as well. Many families will also provide access to a credit card, which will often have no international transaction fee. It'll be really important to have a conversation with your son or daughter about what a credit card means, and to set that up. For some families, they're able to have a credit card in their own name. Sometimes it's not possible, but it can also be a good way of building credit early. But just make sure you have that healthy conversation about what this means. So it will be important to also discuss your budget with your son or daughter about what they are able to do or not able to do. So making sure that you have that conversation will be important. And then also make sure that before you go, that both you and the AFSer understands how money will transfer, and what that looks like. So some people use Apple Pay. They can replenish Apple Pay. Wise, Zelle are also good options. So I recommend you consider those as well. Last, a common question is travel. So everyone will have a travel specific webinar, and we really recommend you do attend this. this is where it's going to be into the nitty-gritty of how to travel with AFS. So make sure that that is, I recommend that you join that, but your son or daughter should definitely join that because it's critical information about what to pack, and how to navigate and what you can expect from AFS and all of that. So please do join that webinar. And then our round trip international airfare is already included in your program fee, but the domestic travel to that point of international departure is not. So once you are notified of your international travel, you'll be able to book that domestic travel. So, in the coming weeks, if you haven't already received it, you'll receive kind of your international travel, which will include the point of your departure city. Typically, it is out of New York City if you're going to Europe. Or if you're going to South America, it's typically out of Miami. If you're going to Asia, it's typically out of LAX. So those would be the two things. And if you have a question about that, please do ask your AFS specialist. You can send us an email, call us. We're happy to provide you with that confirmation as well. Okay, so thank you so much for your time tonight. We want to make sure that we can, if we haven't answered your questions, we've brought new questions. We've completed all of the planned content for tonight. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. We'll do our best to get back to you. If you have a question to Sarah or myself or Sarah or John, would love to share more of that. So
I
please
do
do
have
ask your questions now.
two things that we did not discuss that I think are really important. Parker, you might remember this from me last year, but my son was traveling with medication. And I'm not going to
Mhm.
go into the details of that here, but if you're on this call and you are someone whose child is going to need to travel with medication, it was very difficult for me to get the information that I needed to be able to get him what he needed abroad. You are I guess maybe I'll put my email in the chat. You're welcome to reach out to me directly because at this point I have researched globally so much of this information and would be happy to answer specific questions if you have them about that topic. The other thing, though, that I wish I had had more preparation for as a parent because I did not get any of that from AFS was I have two other younger children who were deeply and dramatically impacted by the exchange experience that my son is having. And because we spent so much time preparing him and ourselves for his departure, I think in many ways we neglected the experience that our other kids were having. And there are definitely things that I would have done differently looking back on that. So knowing that now, they're very much expecting him to come back as the person he was when he left. And by October, I knew he was not that person anymore. And so having neglected that on the front end, we've done a lot more this time to help prepare them. We have a family therapist. They have someone they've been working with to kind of try to help. They've been talking to some returnees. We've had the experience of having hosted numerous students ourselves. And I do think one thing that was really helpful for them was my son left on the 21st of August. Our Kenyan daughter moved in on the 22nd of August. And so it was a bit of a distraction. Not everyone obviously can do that, but that was really helpful. So we can kind of reference some of the things that they've gone through. But if you're someone that has other kids, don't be like us and kind of neglect them in this crazy time period because they're on their own emotional journey too.
That's really good advice. Thank you so much, Sarah. We have a couple questions in the chat too. One is how is the placement success this year currently compared to the same time of previous years? So what percent of AFS hopefuls are still waiting for host family? So across the AFS network, I think we're about 20% ahead of where we were last year. So that's all AFS countries all around the world, which is good. I will say on previous webinars, we provide more detail about host family placements and things like that. Many students have already received a host family, but many will receive a host family in the 4 to 3 weeks before your departure. So it's a wide time frame for when you do receive your host family. And so overall, the AFS network is about 20% ahead of where we were last year. If you ever have questions about that, please do reach out to us. And if we have a concern about a host family, or if we have a question for you, we will be reaching out to you at that point. But so far, so good.
Yes, my son did speak with the counselor while he was gone, not because he was having any significant challenges, but because he had seen one here prior to leaving. And so we just wanted to maintain that relationship in case he was really struggling upon his return. And so we did have, some things set up here. So,
I also just wanted to add that our students are afforded up to 12 counseling sessions with whether it be a counselor, therapist, mental health professional through the AFS insurance. So that's 12 sessions throughout the course of the year. And yeah, Sarah, like as you pointed out, sometimes it's just small stuff or maybe they have a counselor they're already seeing here in the States that they just want to continue speaking to maintain that relationship. Other times it is in response to perhaps a mental health crisis or just a crisis in general. But again, we do have that up to 12 sessions of that counseling available to our participants.
Thank you so much for these good questions too. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I know there's a lot of chats. If I didn't, I tried my best to get answers during the call. So if I missed one of them, please let me know.
Feel free to raise your hand as well if you would like to ask the question, not over the chat, but over just asking to the group.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Well, I think we are probably at our moment to say thank you very much to everyone. I also want to say a very specific thank you to Sarah. It's been lovely to hear from you, and your advice was sage. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I want to thank everyone on the call for trusting AFS with this really important experience. And if you do have questions, we would love to connect with you. So don't be a stranger, especially between now and departure. We'll continue to have more resources for AFS students. We always encourage you to join them. But otherwise, thank you for your time, and we very much look forward to the experiences that are so meaningful. So thanks, everyone. Let's be in touch, and I hope you have a good evening, and maybe an early bon voyage. So cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.